Hi there, this is Mary Wisner from the Gallagher Law Library at UW Law. I'm going to show you a Bluebook hack that I use all the time, and that's finding an example when I'm not sure how to cite something. Here's a tough one for you. How can you cite Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act? Now, what's tough about that is that you might not be sure whether you want to cite the statutes at large with the public law citation. And here we see there's our section, Section 1557, and we see that it's been codified in Title 42 of the United States Code, 18,116. So we have to think about what's going to work, citing the public law or citing the code, and how do we do it gracefully? Well, what I like to do is I go to Hein Online and I do a search. So I'm going to the Law Journal Library and I'm going to go into an advanced search. I say I want 1557, that's the section I'm looking for. And I want it to be close to Affordable Care Act in quotations. And how close do I want it? I think within 25 words should do it. And then I run a search. And here I see a number of articles, Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, clearly a relevant article. It's from Harvard Law Journal. There's one from the Yale Journal of Law and Feminism. Here's one from the Columbia Journal of Law and Social Problems. We have hundreds of these to look at. Over here on the left, I can look at the titles of the journals, and I could say, oh, I want to look at the examples from the Harvard Law Review or the Yale Law Journal. Now, just to make things a little bit faster, I saved those into PDFs so we can look at them. Here's the one from the Yale Law Journal. The author goes on and discusses a lot of issues and then has a whole section discussing Section 1557. And the way this author does it is referring to it as the original section number, Section 1557 of the ACA, quotes it, and then drops a footnote and cites to the United States Code. So that way, the author's looking at both the original section number, which people talk about, and where it's codified. Here's the example from the Harvard Law Review. In the text, the author speaks with the original section number under Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act, drops a footnote, and then talks about what Section 1557 does, has another footnote. If we go to the bottom of the screen, we see that the first one cited the statutes at large, Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, Public Law Number, and so on, statutes at large. And that's citing all of the ACA, and then the second footnote cites specifically where Section 1557 is codified. Okay, so that was pretty cool. I have a complicated citation task. I'm not sure how to do it, so I just look and see how a couple reputable law journals have done it. Now, why did I choose the examples from Harvard and Yale? Okay, you've heard of Harvard and Yale, they're fancy pants law schools. But the important thing here is that they are two of the four journals that published the Bluebook. The Bluebook, a uniform system of citation, is compiled by the editors of four law journals: Columbia Law Review, Harvard Law Review, University of Pennsylvania Law Review, and the Yale Law Journal. So when you're looking for examples, it's great if you can find an example from those journals, because presumably the editors of those journals know their Bluebook backwards and forwards. Let's look at another example. How can you cite a press release? Now, somewhere in the Bluebook, there's a rule telling you this, but let's just look for an example. I'm going to go back to Hein Online, and this time I'm going to go to the Law Journal Library and start off with an advanced search. I say I want press release, and I'm going to say up front what journals I want. I want an example from the Harvard Law Review or the Yale Law Journal or the Columbia Law Review or the University of Pennsylvania Law Review. Now, I could also choose the journal's online companions, but I'm not going to bother doing that right now. And let's say I'd like something fairly recent, say last 5 years, something since 2015. Okay, so I've got a simple search looking for press release, but I've chosen which journals I want. And now we have a bunch of examples. The first one happens to be an article by that scholar, Barack Obama, and he's quoting a press release from the Office of the Press Secretary, White House announces new commitments. And we can look through and see different examples of press releases from government agencies, press releases from corporations, and so on. And we can see examples of how the editors from Harvard, Yale, Penn, and Columbia decided to cite it. That's the end of my demo, and let me just tell you that this was the Gallagher Law Library, University of Washington School of Law. A little video by Mary Wisner, my first ever, recorded on March 30th, 2020.